We are very happy to have from LaGrange Park, Illinois. I got the park right this time.
Correct, yes.
Mr. Russ Sharp, who has been there before. Remember Russ Sharp? Been a member here for a long time. So Amtrak finally delivered Russ.
Third
And
attempt.
normally I would say something about Russ's career at EMD, but that would completely wipe out what Russ has to say about his program. So Russ, I'm gonna go back. The floor is yours. And,
Okay. Thank you for the invitation to show some photos, talk a little bit about EMD. And we have a special guest came all the way up from New Orleans, Louisiana. Good buddy, Mark Del Statius. Want to just step up and so they can see him, Mark? Hmm? No, I got him on. Yeah, Mark and I, he was a student at the University of Delaware on the work study program. I was going to Drexel Institute of Technology on the work study program, and our work sessions were on the Pennsylvania Railroad. So we met streamlining all the curves between Princeton Junction and, was it Washington, Mark, or Baltimore?
Lions, doubtful.
Yeah. Okay, let's start the program here. I'm on the original B&O Capital Limited, headed for my interview with Electro-Motive. And this was a stop at South Chicago. That was a suburban stop for Chicago for the Baltimore Eye. We're headed to Grand Central Station in Chicago. And first job was a field instructor for EMD. And the first job was riding Great Northern Railway SD 45s from Minneapolis Junction to Wilmer, Minnesota here. Sometimes I'd ride further west of this was the first crew change west of Minneapolis Junction. And sometimes I'd ride further to Breckenridge, Minnesota on the Red River. And you can see Great Northern was just in the process of changing to a big sky blue livery. I would usually deadhead back to Minneapolis Junction on the Great Northern Secondary train, not the Empire Builder, but the Western Star. And one time there was an empty grain train with 4 F units, ABBA, heading back to Minneapolis Junction. So I boarded the 4th unit, the cab, and I had a big catalog case with my meters and catalogs and all. And the engineer said he would slow down when we went by Minneapolis Junction. He didn't slow down. I got off anyway and hit the ground on my shoulder, and fortunately didn't roll under the train. And then this is Union Pacific reefer block east of North Platte, Nebraska. That the next assignment was after riding Great Northern SD 45s. I was inspecting Union Pacific DDA 40X locomotives when they'd come in on runs from the west at North Platte, Nebraska, usually in the middle of the night. And they were 98 feet long, 6,600 horsepower, two 16-645 turbocharged engines, 4-axle trucks. Almost were too long for our erecting bay at LaGrange. Let's go back here. And then next I was, then after North Platte, I was riding DDA 40Xs from from Salt Lake City to Ogden, had to be the shortest crew district in the US, about 30 miles. So sometimes I'd ride on to Milford, Utah. Then I would head back to Salt Lake on the Union Pacific City of Los Angeles. Then the next job was junior service engineer based at the Southern Pacific Tailor Shop in Los Angeles. And then while I was there, I had to go and ride new Western Pacific GB 40-2s through the Feather River Canyon. This is at Oroville Canyon, California. I would ride them through the Feather River Canyon east to Portola, California. This is a view at Oroville with Alcos, EMDs, and Baldwins. And then I spent 5 years in sales engineering. And one of the jobs was going out on wreck inspections. This was a wreck inspection at the Apalachicola Northern Railroad. 3 units derailed, and so we had to make an estimate, a wreck estimate, make an estimate of what we would charge to repair the wreck damage. This was another wreck inspection on the Atlanta St. Andrews Bay at where that Panama City, yeah. And then after sales engineering, then from 1976 till about 2000, I went into export locomotive sales as a district sales manager in the International Locomotive Business Group. And one of my first jobs, I wasn't handling China, but my boss, Otis Small, asked me to help out. We hosted our first delegation from the People's Republic of China. One of the places we took them was here to tour the Southern Railway Chattanooga shop, and the Southern had this NW2 all spick and span for us. Sorry? That's the model designation. Oh, EMD, Electro-Motive Division, General Motors Corporation.
Power originally coming for the welded frame.
And we had a private GM jet, and so we flew to Chattanooga from Chicago, and then we flew to Atchison, Kansas to see Rockwell that did our bogie castings. And then we flew to Wenatchee, Washington, and the Burlington Northern added a coach and the open-end observation car Kootenai River on the river freight train. And we rode, they got to ride from over Stevens Pass from Wenatchee, and the freight stopped for us right at King Street Station in Seattle every couple miles, so everybody could ride, and everybody could ride the SD cabs of the SD 40-2s. We stopped the freight every couple miles so everybody could get a cab ride. And before we got on, I arranged with the BN division superintendent. They parked the freight train east of Wenatchee, and then we took a bus out alongside the BN so everybody could see the length of the freight train. We had a kind of a photo run by east of Wenatchee. We all got off the bus and watched the freight come roll by, and then at Wenatchee, we got on a road to King Street Station, Seattle. And first territory as a district sales manager in the international locomotive business was India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan. This was taken in New Delhi of Indian Railways, WP's Indian Railways is broad gauge, 5'6" gauge. W stands for wide gauge. And P for passenger. This locomotive was in passenger service, 462. And at the time I was covering India, there were still 5,000 steam locomotives running. And stupid me, most weekends there, I stayed at the pool at the hotel instead of going out photographing steam locomotives. This is an Indian Railways electric locomotive. They were built at Chittaranjan Locomotive Works. And our sales rep, Wade Malik, he had been in the Indian Air Force. He loved to he loved to fly everywhere. I finally talked him into taking the train. So we're going to board this Rajdhani Express. Stands for the capital. We're going to ride from New Delhi overnight to Howrah, across next to Calcutta. So we had a sleeping car, and there was an Indian businessman sharing our compartment, and he turned out to, his hobby was studying General Motors. He could name every single chairman of General Motors. And then one of the countries I covered was Pakistan. That's a commuter train at Karachi with Alco. And they also had General Electric locomotives, and they had some EMD locomotives. We had roots blown units maintained at Rawalpindi, and then turbocharged GT26 CW units maintained here at Karachi. And
Cars is that?
well, you can, if I could see it better, I could count the cars.
10. Good doors per car.
So the railway headquarters was Lahore. So I'd always meet with the CME AR Qureshi, and the conversation always went like, well, Russ, how come we're getting excessive piston ring wear and cylinder liner wear? And I would say, well, because you're using Russian high sulfur fuel. And then I would say, well, you can avoid that by going to higher TB and lube oil. And Qureshi would say, well, we can't afford it. So it was always the same conversation every visit. And one time he took me to a room, the GEs had their narrow gauge 761 traction motor, and they were just failing, all over the place. One time he took me to a room, and the room was stacked all the way to the ceiling with failed GE Brand X 761 traction motors. And this was taken at the Mogapur workshops in Lahore. A British built 462, and they would have forging drop forges and all, and all the workers would just be dressed in sandals, and and one time I rode one of our GT26 CWs south from Lahore to Multan, and this was our locomotive is on the right there, and there was a steam locomotive on the siding. And this it really is a Brantford steam railroad with diesel locomotives. That's our SW1000, and the reason I'm here is that a quarry company in England, Foster Yeoman, they were interested. They were starting to run bigger and bigger aggregates trains out of their quarry. They just had a former British Rail Class 08. So they engaged a consultant to do a survey who builds the best switching locomotive, and they kept coming up with the same answer, a company called Electro-Motive Division in LaGrange, Illinois. So their transport director, Ken Painter, he wanted to actually see one. This was the type of locomotive in SW 1001 that they were going to buy, 1,000 horsepower. So he actually wanted to see one and touch one. So I set up this cab ride on the Brantford Steam Railroad from North Brantford out to Long Island Sound, where they would transfer the aggregates to barges. We took the Broadway Limited after during Penn Central, and it was a rather rough ride all night, going over highway crossings. And we got to Harrisburg, and the conductor, we changed to the GG1 at Harrisburg, and the conductor gave a great ovation, you know, how wonderful the GG1 was. And so the success of the SW 1001 led to Foster Yeoman purchasing 4 British Rail Class 59s, our JT 26 CW-SS, J for double cab, T for turbocharged, 2 for second generation of diesel engine, 16 for 16-cylinder engine, JT 26 JT, and C for Coco, 6-axle, 6-motor, W for standard gauge or wider, SS for Super Series wheel creep control. And these were the first privately owned locomotives ever to run on British Rail. Just happened to be the right timing. Maggie Thatcher was getting ready to privatize British Rail, and British Rail's freight director, Henry Sanderson, he had experienced EMDs at Sparks, Nevada one time, and was impressed with the sound of them going by. And then the Foster Yeoman transport director, Ken Painter, they were buddies, so they did a deal. First privately owned and the first American locomotives on British Rail. And here we're at the British Rail Toton shop near Derby, England, and doing a noise level test. And British Rail had some stringent specifications, and we had to put a exhaust silencer on, mounted in the roof, 10 foot in length, and to make sure the exhaust went out the exhaust, we had to overfuel by 0.5%. So it penalizes 0.5% on fuel consumption. And the noise level test is being done, in British Rail, for whatever reason, measured the noise above the locomotive instead of along the side over the exhaust. And now our Class 59 is going out to the ruling grade between Foster Yeoman and London Savernac Bank, about 0.5%, going out for an adhesion test. The first attempt was not successful. When the locomotive was being tested at LaGrange, somebody reconnected some of the main generator cables incorrectly. So there was a main generator cable grounded. So we had to bring EMD guys over to Foster Yeoman, pulling cables, pulling old cables out, putting new cables in. The second test was successful. That's 2 British Rail Class 56s ahead of the Class 59. This is a shot at the Foster Yeoman Muirhead engine shed near Shepton Mallet, England. The name of the quarry was Tor Works. And this was the here where they had a drop table. They could drop axles and traction motors. This was a shot of one in service at Westbury, England. And then once in a while, Foster Yeoman would have a celebration, and British Rail would send their various locomotives for display. This was a Class 37, one of the more reliable British Rail locomotives on display at Muirhead with a Ruston engine. And this was a British Rail operated some diesel hydraulic locomotives, and Foster Yeoman kept this one and put it on display at Muirhead. And then Foster Yeoman had a competitor about a mile down the road, Amy Roadstone. And with the Class 59s, all of a sudden Foster Yeoman had much lower transport costs than Amy Roadstone. So they finally did a deal with British Rail and the government, and they bought 4 Class 59s. This is at our plant in London, Ontario, before it went into the paint shop. There it is. There's one painted. I didn't exactly care for the mustard color livery myself, but and then they built a new locomotive shed at the Watley Quarry. And this is Westbury BR Class 56 on the Foster Yeoman Stone train. And some photos taken during the good old days of British Rail. King's Cross Station. British Rail Class 31, built by Brush with a Mearleys diesel engine. King's Cross Station, April 1979. They were still running mail trains there and still used TPOs, traveling post offices, the equivalent of RPOs here. And here we're King's Cross Station and the HST high-speed train. I used to ride them all the time between London and Derby, where details had to be settled for the Foster Yeoman locomotives. They had a power car at each end. There's still a few left running. High-speed engine, but I only once did have a delay with an HST1 power car went down, and we arrived Derby maybe 15 minutes late. But they were high maintenance. I mean, they had probably, as often as possible, they had to do maintenance on them. A couple of HSTs at Paddington Station. Then I got a cab ride in one from London to Leeds, I believe. Yeah, Leeds, and we're right here, we're going up the East Coast Main Line. I think before it was electrified, meaning southbound HST. Or we would have been doing 125 miles an hour here. That's why they call them HST 125s. This is a view of HST heading toward Westbury near the Foster Yeoman Quarry. And one at Derby, and I spent about a year of my life there, not living there, but going back and forth every other month to settle details on the Foster Yeoman Class 59s. They had 1,000 BR engineers based there at the Railway Technical Center. They had some interesting specs. The top of the control stand had to hold teacups. British air brake system, Westinghouse UK, no relation to Westinghouse UK. I kept insisting, and they said, well, you got to have a engine room fire extinguisher. I said, we don't have engine room fires. Our injectors are strictly low pressure. And they insisted, so we had to put on a halon fire extinguisher. And one of the more interesting things, our control system is non-earth, and British Rail grew up with an earth system, and so one day I spent a whole day at the Railway Technical Center. I did, just listening to them saying, "Well, we want a non-earth," and I kept saying no, and finally it got settled. We met at a restaurant in Derby with a British Rail freight engineer and the health and safety inspector at Mr. A guy by the name of Oliver. I pointed out, well, there's 2 units running in Northern Ireland, EMD units that are non-earth and never had a problem. So after a few gin and tonics, he agreed, what the heck? Yeah, you can have a non-earth system. This is at Derby, class 45. They call them peak units because the Peak District kind of starts north of Derby. These are a couple British Rail class 20s on the Jolly Fisherman on weekends. In the summer, they ran passenger trains from Derby to the East Coast, Skegness on the East Coast, and they called the train the Jolly Fisherman with double-headed class 20s. This was the final locomotive that British Rail engineered, class 58. They built 50 of them, and they call them the bone because they look like a fish bone. That's what you get when you have a locomotive designed by a committee. And the walkway was meant to walk on. It turned out to be too narrow. Nobody could walk on the outside walkway. Isn't that a pretty locomotive? Boy, look at that beautiful cab. Just a lineup of units at Toten Shop. This is a Westbury. This is what a class 08 looks like. That's what Foster Yeoman, that's what our SW 1001 replaced at Foster Yeoman. There's still a few running, and some are being converted to battery powered. But there's very little shunting required anymore. Now it's mostly, block trains, intermodal trains. That was another quarry company, Tarmac. And crew on the West Coast Main Line, class 85, class 85, London to Glasgow train going up the West Coast Main Line. This was an excursion on the dead end track. BR Banbury, Banbury, England. Oh, they class 50. Yeah, they called them Hoovers because they sounded like a vacuum cleaner, the air system. And fortunately, the freight engineer I dealt with on selling the details, Foster Yeoman Construction details, David Russell, he was an avid rail fan. So every weekend we would go out rail fanning, and we're riding an excursion there on the right. Oops. Couple the older diesel motive units at Leeds, England. This is at the Didcot Railway Center. That's a brake van. They can in England, their cabooses are called brake vans, and a class 31. Muirhead. Oh, yeah, the Yeoman Stone trains. Well, still to this day, I mean, they're still running out of there. They have to departing the yard to get onto a branch. They have to go backwards around a curve on a grade. So this class 40 BR class 47s essentially acting as a helper locomotive to our class 59, shoving the train on a grade and a curve back out to the branch, where then they go forward on the branch to a junction with the main line. This is a Festiniog Railway, Portmatic. This was built by Alco in the USA, the Mountaineer. They before they became a tourist railroad, they hauled slate, and only 1'11" and 1/6" track gauge. In the days of hauling slate, they would from where the slate was, the other end of the line, they would just let the carloads of slate just coast down the grade to Portmatic, and then horses would haul the cars back up to Festiniog. And then I covered Israel for a couple of years. This is at Tel Aviv. Train ready to an EMD, ready to head to Haifa. So I would go to Tel Aviv to the railway headquarters, were just kind of to the left. And then the units were maintained at Haifa. So I would go to Haifa, stay at a Dan Hotel in Mount Carmel with a balcony looking down on Haifa and the Mediterranean. And then I did have to go near the Gaza Strip one time. The railway purchased a one turbocharged unit for a coal train, imported coal to a power generating station coming in at Ashdod. And it was based down at Dimona, down toward the Gaza Strip. So I did drive my rental car down that way. This is at Haifa, and this is an ABB flex liner, and that's the CME Michael Baranoy standing next to the ABB flex liner. They were problematical. The engines were air cooled, not exactly good for Israel. And ABB had a whole team of engineers. One time I went into their office, and the manuals reached from the floor to the ceiling on every wall, honest to God. Whoops. And, one time my daughter was, attended University of Wisconsin, and she had an exchange program, spent 3 months going to American University in Rome. So I flew over and we got a rail pass and took trains all around Italy. This is one of the stops, Salerno, Italy. That's a shot at Rome. And Holland was part of my territory, but there, I mean, I would stop there now and then, but there was no potential, mostly all electric. If you seen it, Utrecht, Holland. Utrecht, Holland, electric locomotive. And Norway was when I covered after India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and after India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, then I covered Europe as far east as Romania, including Norway. And this was an EMD. This was an EMD powered unit built by NOHAB in Sweden on the Norwegian state railways at Trondheim. And then this was our European demonstrator, a G12, built 1953, London, Ontario. And so after it was finished demonstrating in like Germany, Sweden, Norway, then the Swedish State Railways, SJ, acquired it. When they were finished with it, a group called the GM Group and acquired it. And they would run excursions all over Norway and sometimes into Sweden. And so I'd always make sure when I was calling on Norwegian State Railways, I tied up in Oslo for a weekend so I could ride the excursions. Mark, remember the trip? One time they ran a trip from far north of the Arctic Circle at Bodo, Bodo, down to Oslo. And we even had auto racks on the rear of the train carrying Norwegian antique automobiles and antique motorcycles, right, Mark? And we had a DI3 ahead of the G12. So my buddy, the chairman or president of the GM Group in Jarl Hole, said, why don't you guys, Mark, ride the G12 and blow the horn at crossings. So I blew like you do in America, two longs, a short and a long. Before long, Jarl was getting calls on emergency calls, local residents wondering, well, is there some kind of emergency? Because in Norway, they only blow, what, two shorts or one short? I'm blowing two longs, a short and a long. And now the G12 is unfortunately peacefully retired at a museum in Gavle, Sweden. The safety authorities in Norway started not taking a liking to heritage equipment and got to be way too much red tape, so they couldn't run the excursions anymore. But Jarl still puts out their publication. It's called the oil filter because diesel locomotives have oil filters, Norwegian for oil filter. And he's having his 70th birthday party late in October. So I'm flying SAS from Chicago to Oslo, October 18th to attend his 70th birthday party, and then back departing Oslo, November 7th. Round trip fare is $630. If I had departed Oslo on November 6th, it would have been $1,100. And one time I was hosting some people from the Norwegian Railways and a guy from our licensee, Henschel in Germany. I rented a car in Billings, and we're driving to Glendive, Montana, where we had a power by the hour operation, and came across here at Terry, Montana. BN had this natural gas powered prototype on display, and they were trying to educate the locals about a natural gas powered locomotive. And I will show you an award. So I'm driving down. Well, we can look at that later. I got an award there, a ticket, coming down the hill in Forsyth, Montana, for doing about 110 miles an hour. And I didn't have to go to the police station. The guy took cash. I got the award certificate in the folder there. You can look at it after I'm finished. So I got him we took a cab ride in these SC60Ms on a eastbound loaded unit coal train east from Glendive. There's a grade west east of Glendive. So once we got to the summit, then we got off and went back by car to Glendive. This was a former Northern Pacific line used mostly by coal trains. And then part of the territory was Ireland and Northern Ireland. This is Belfast Central Station. Train headed to Dublin with a GM. And believe it or not, there was 18 of these JT-22 CWs, and they're still all in service for Irish Rail. They were built at LaGrange. And I would go to make the call in Belfast, start out with Roy Beatty, the chairman, in his office at 10 a.m. He'd say, "Russ, how about a cocktail? How about a drink?" And then we would go for lunch at their dining room at Central Station. It would start at noon and end at 5 o'clock, and they did nothing but drink. And then Stan Myers, the CME, he'd take me back to the hotel, pick me up at 7, and then more drinking all night. Surprised I'm not an alcoholic. Whoops. Oh, this was went on a railroad equipment trade mission sponsored by the U.S. government in Washington. We did a tour of railroad facilities in Poland, and coming along with me was Jolene Molitaris, the first female FRA administrator appointed by Bill Clinton, and Paul Reistrup, who was one of the chairman of Amtrak. That's a shop in Poland. And Mark knows all about this. This is a short line Tagab. Here they connect. This is Kristinehamn, Sweden. Here they connect with the SJ, the Swedish State Railways, and they got these EMD NOHAB units. And Mark even got to run one of these, right, Mark? And this was They even had one painted in Great Northern Railway livery. Uh, former Swedish State Railways three. They also had a double unit with the cab on both ends painted in Great Northern livery. And this is then the big order came. Ed Burkhart, he started at Wisconsin Central, and then when Maggie Thatcher privatized British Rail, he got the freight franchise and the Mail and Express franchise, and he bought 250 of these Class 66s, our JT42 CW, JT42 CWS. This is on the test track at London, Ontario. By then, we had shifted production from LaGrange to London, Ontario, GMCL, Diesel Division, General Motors Canada Limited, with components coming from LaGrange. And also Freightliner bought some. Another shot on the test track. Freightliner, after privatization, they did the intermodal business. And then Belgium was part of the territory, and they had some, we had a licensee, Brunevel. And this is one of the EMD Brunevel units in Namur, where the maintenance base was. I would call on the CME of Mr. Appleton's. And during the time I covered Belgium, they did tender for, it was about 50 small shunting locomotives for working at their hump yard at Rotterdam. We bid through our licensee, GEC Alstrom in Valencia, Spain. But of course, they ordered locomotives with a Belgian diesel engine I never heard of, ABC diesel engines. And I covered Ecuador for several years. I covered Venezuela, Ecuador, Colombia, and Peru. So when I was visiting Quito, I went across the river to Duran and photographed this Guayaquil in Quito. It was still steam locomotive still being used. And then went on a Trains Unlimited, Chris Scow Trains Unlimited trip on the Guayaquil and Quito Railroad. The railroad was cut into three different sections. There was a mountain slide, and then there was a washout. So with the railroad within three different sections, we did manage to ride over each section, and a derailment every single day. So another shot in Duran. This was a photo run, one of our photo run bys. Another shot of a run by. Subsequently, I think the government of Ecuador spent, I don't know, $200 or $300 million to get the whole line back in shape from Quito to Guayaquil, to run an excursion train, a tourist train twice a week, and now it's not running at all. as far as I know. And they acquired some diesels from Alstom in France. And I was involved with one tender for a few locomotives and went down to Quito with our sales rep there. We spent about 3 days, day and night, preparing the tender, preparing our proposal. We showed up at the appointed time to submit the proposal at the railway headquarters in Quito, and guess what? The door was locked. They were on strike. The tender was never adjudicated. So eventually they got a loan from France and got these Alstom diesel electric locomotives with a French peel stick diesel engine.
The boat.
Yeah,
Three trucks, yeah, yeah.
right. And here we're at the Rio Bamba where their shop's located. Before we got started, of course, there was a derailment. They're trying to repair the derailment. And we never did get out of Rio Bamba. The government had jacked up the price of gasoline, I think, and then the local natives were protesting, and north of Rio Bamba, they had removed some rail. So thought we were stranded in Rio Bamba, and guess what? We got to ride in the Ecuadorian Air Force C-130 from Rio Bamba back to Quito. And the guy in the middle, that's my friend David Russell, the British Rail freight engineer that I worked with on the Foster Yeoman settlement of details. We even got to ride in the cockpit looking down on the volcanoes, and so our Trains Unlimited Ecuadorian has some good connections. That's at Quito after we got off the C-130. And then Guatemala, Henry Posner III won the concession to run the railroad. So I went on one of his excursions from Guatemala City to the Atlantic Ocean, Puerto Barrios. We had a steam one day, we had a GE U-10B another day, an Alco another day. This is on the turntable at Guatemala City. And I think the curator at the Smithsonian of the Railway Division, Bill Withen, has commented this is the most intact old-time railroad shop in the world or something like that. That's General Electric U-10B on the transfer table at Guatemala City. This was, I think, the first stop on the way to Puerto Barrios. And then, under Henry Posner III, they were attracting some business, hauling containers of imported Russian coiled steel from Puerto Barrios to Guatemala City. And then truckers or somebody bribed somebody in the government, and all of a sudden Henry Posner III lost the concession, and immediately the locals started tearing up the rails. I don't think there's anything left of the railroad now. They were, stealing the rail, dismantling bridges, stealing them. Oh yeah, I did handle Colombia also, National Railways of Colombia. While I was covering Colombia, the National Railways of Colombia, that's a 3-foot gauge. They tendered for a couple of locomotives, and we had to have our D30s, our narrow gauge D36 traction motors. And by this time, we had gotten rid of the tooling. So I had to plead a case with our Warren Fox, our director of sales and service, to make it available so we could bid. And finally, he agreed, but Brand X General Electric beat us on price. So we lost that one. And then there was a Sarah Home project, a new coal mine with a railroad to a port. So they tendered for Morrison Knudsen had the project, and we bid a domestic. We were able to bid a domestic locomotive, but our director of sales and service wanted to charge export prices, which are higher. So we lost that one to Brand X. Then Peru, the railroad was Enafir, and I got to ride a cab. I took a cab ride in Enafir from Lima. We went over the time it was the highest railway in the world. Went over the summit at about 16,000 feet above sea level. And they did acquire, while I was handling that, they acquired some GT26 CW-2Bs, the B, because they had to be shorter than normal, the sharp curves in the Andes Mountains due to concerns with overthrow. They had to be shorter. And then I went to La Arroya, Central Maine copper mine had EMD locomotives. And Venezuela, the railroad was IAAFE. While I was covering Venezuela, they acquired 4 GP15-1s. But I spent about 3 months living and staying in Caracas to negotiate the terms and conditions. We submitted our standard EMD GM terms and conditions, and we won the business. Then Freddie Castellone, the head honcho we dealt with, gave me the terms and conditions, and my boss said, Russ, I've never seen such ridiculous terms and conditions in my career. So it took 3 months, and I was determined to get standard EMD terms and conditions. So it took me staying there, Caracas, for about 3 months to get the contract. Fortunately, I had my wife there with me, ex-wife with me. And actually, while covering Germany, the operator of trams and ports in Cologne, they did purchase some of our Class 66s, but it took one of our engineers spending about a year going back and forth to Bonn to settle the homologation before HGK could run them. And that's an ICE Intercity Express train at Frankfurt. And some buddies and some EMD guys, we did make it over to Inner Mongolia about a year before the end of mainline steam, the Jitong Railway. That's a former Chinese railway, QJ 210-2. Oh, and Romania, that was part of my territory, and covering Europe, and managed to do a deal for 2 prototype repowering of Romanian State Railways locomotives with our H710 engine and other EMD components. And Ceausescu and his wife had just recently been shot at Sunrise, the dictator. I did even get to have a meeting in Ceausescu's former office with a senator who was looking for you know what. And of course, you know what my answer was, no. So, so the work was done at Electro-Motive in Craiova, Romania. So I thought it was great. Two electrodes working together, Electro-Motive and Electro-Motive. And that led to about 70 EGM 2100s. It was a Japanese soft loan. So, so Mitsui was our sales rep in Romania. And I really enjoyed Romania. I mean, on weekends, I'd take the train down to beachfront hotel near Constanța or up to a ski resort in the Carpathian Mountains near Brasov. And then I had to fly to Johannesburg, South Africa from London for about a 20-minute meeting with a steel mill in Pretoria that wanted to buy one switching locomotive, International ISCOR, International Steel Corporation. They did buy the one locomotive. We had our affiliate in Argentina do the assembly. We sent the components there. So on my own, I stayed a weekend and went down to Kimberley where they were still running steam and got to go over here to Germiston near Johannesburg and see steam just before the end of steam. That's a coal dock there. They would put the coal up on the trestle and then by gravity put coal in the tenders. And they did have some brand X diesel locomotives on the left. Nice looking 484 in my opinion. And Mark and I did this trip in the early 70s. That's when I was a junior service engineer and based at the SP Southern Pacific Tailor Shop. We did a circle trip around Mexico, right, Mark? And we took the Chihuahua Pacific to Los Mochis, and the Mexican Pacific Railroad was still running steam. They served a sugar mill at Los Mochis. And we did a circle trip, right, Mark? We went down to where? Guadalajara, Mexico City, back up through Saltillo, rode the narrow gauge Coahuila and Zacatecas to Concepcion del Oro. This is at San Luis Potosí and MLW FA2. This is all during our circle train trip. This is Valle de Mexico Roundhouse in Mexico City. The good old days, you could just walk into a yard, into a roundhouse, no problemo. It's an Alco RS1 there. This was looked like a kit bash unit done at San Luis Potosí, EMD powered for sure, and but a little bit of this and a little bit of that car body wise. Yeah, they still had a passenger station. They were still running passenger trains then in and out of Mexico City, mixed trains. Now there's not a single passenger train in or out of Mexico City. There is a rapid transit, I believe, but no passenger trains, not even a commuter railroad. Another shot of Valle de Mexico. Good old EMD G12, built in 1961. There's apparently an ex-Santa Fe combine at Mexico City. National Railways of Mexico, NDM.